Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these adorable pumpkins. So there'll be 3 different sizes that I will show on how to make. I'll be mostly focusing on making the small one in this tutorial. So let's get to what we'll need to make these pumpkins. The supplies you're going to need is some acrylic yarn. This is a medium 4 weight that I'll be using. So any colors that you want, preferably in a 4 weight, because that's the pattern we'll be following. So this yarn says to use 5.5 millimeter needles, or a US size 9. I'm going to be using a US 10.5, 6.5 millimeters, just because this is the size that I wanted to use. So pay attention to your yarn label and your needle sizes, and you might have to play around with it just because it's always different when you're working your stitches. This one is a circular knitting needle. You won't necessarily need that for this specific project. You could, but with how many stitches we're doing, it won't work and stretch very well, and I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible for you guys. So even if you don't have circular ones, if you just have the regular straight ones, that's fine. It'll work just the same. You also want to get some stuffing. You'll need a lot of stuffing if you're planning on doing the larger, medium or larger pumpkin, but you'll definitely need to have extra stuffing handy for this. You'll also probably want to have a measuring tape. I do give measurements on how big for each of the pumpkins, depending on what size you're just wanting to do. The sizes will be in the description, and I'll try and drop them also in the video as we do the tutorial. This isn't necessary, but you can have a stitch counter. Otherwise, if you're not going to do a stitch counter, I usually just write everything on a notebook, so you can do it that way as well, but this is a good option if you want to have that. A pair of scissors to finish and cut our ends and throughout the project. You'll want needle. I have 2 different sizes. One's a smaller one and one's a bigger one. Bigger one's really good for doing thicker yarn, or even just when we're doing this project, there'll become a point where I'll mention a longer one that can be very helpful. Now, this is all going to depend on how you're wanting to customize your pumpkin, but you can have sticks from your yard, or you can have corks or cinnamon sticks, or whatever you want to get creative to do your little stems for your pumpkin. So I'll be doing some sticks from my yard. I do suggest if you're going to be doing sticks, try to have different sizes, because when it comes to doing and closing up our pumpkin, your size may vary and they don't always end up the same. So having, you know, bigger and smaller in thickness will be helpful, just because it may not, you may need a bigger or smaller one. I'm also going to be using some of these leaves. They're kind of cloth-like, but I have a bunch of different colors here that I'm going to play around with. So you can use whatever you have or find in the stores this time of year. And then lastly, you'll probably need a glue stick and glue gun if you're going to do like what I'm doing with the stem like this, just to attach and secure everything. So I can also go on to more detail of supplies as we go along, because we're spontaneous like that. All the supplies that we'll need for this will be in the description below. I have affiliated links. Most of them will be through Amazon, so definitely check that out. I try to put together very good lists of all the things that we need for these projects. So without further ado, let's get going on making pumpkins. So I'm going to be doing the tutorial for the small pumpkin, and then all the other sizes I will have the modifications and whatever you need to do for this. It's really not much different. It's just more of how many rows you'll have to do. But your casting on will be the exact same for all 3 pumpkins. So I'll have that all in the description, and also I will put it here in the video. showing what the actual number of rows will be. So to start our pumpkins, you're going to want to measure out 34 inches as the minimum and about 36 as the max. So anywhere between 34 and 36 inches should be good. And so that's going to be where you're going to have your slip knot. So measure that all out and we'll get our slip knot. So there's 34 and there's 36. I'll probably go just in the middle. That's about where I'm going to do my slip knot. So I'll do your slip knot. It's going to be where we'll attach it onto our needle. And if you need a much more slower pace on how to do these beginning steps, I have videos on how to do casting on and slip stitch and all that stuff. So I'm not going to go into it a whole lot in depth here, just to focus on getting to the project. So definitely check that out on my playlist linked below. So we're going to cast on 48 stitches for all 3 pumpkins. So I'm going to start doing mine now, and I'll meet you guys once I get to my 48th one. Alright, once you have your 48 cast on, so the first row we will knit. Nice and easy, just knitting. You'll knit all the way across. So I'll meet you after I knit all these. Alright, I just finished knitting my first row. So now we're on to row 2. And this row you are going to purl all the way. It's a fairly simple repeat. So you'll do that all the way to the end. It's just purling all the way across. Alright, just finished doing that second row by purling. So you can already see my purl stitches are showing through and my knitted stitches on this side. So that's what you'll do for the rest of this pattern, is repeat with doing knit and then purl, knit and then purl all the way. 38 rows. Now when I was first making this pumpkin, I did 19 rows. But I have found that once it comes to getting and stuffing, my stitches really separated and it doesn't look very nice. Instead, I'm doubling the rows. Now you're welcome to just do the 19 instead. Just know that you might have this problem when you come to stuffing and it just won't look as nice. So you can do 19, but I strongly encourage, if you want it not to poke through, do the 38. And this will vary according to the size. Like I said, it will be in the description for all the different sizes, and I'm also going to show them right here. And since we're doing the small pumpkin, you will keep doing that until you reach 38 rows if you're choosing to double up like I suggested. If not, you will be doing it until you have 19 rows. And all the other ones will be adjusted according to what's in the description. So a suggestion for your keeping track, because I know for me in the beginning when I was first learning, trying to keep track of, which row, or even just counting, because sometimes you just want to sit there and maybe watch a show and not have to focus so much on what you're doing. I like to write down, so I have all the way up to 38, and then having which row is which. And then as we've done, just check off as I finish each one. That way I'm not having to worry about what number I'm on, but then I also know which row is which. So it's just a suggestion, but this works really well for me, especially when you're stopping in the middle and then picking it back up. It makes it really easy to remember where you left off. So you can do that if that works for you. So I will be doing my knitting and my purling all the way until I reach row 38, and I'll meet you back. Alright, I just finished doing my row 38, so you can already see the purl stitches are showing pretty nicely. And then the other side is all knit stitches. So if you did your 38 rows, you should be measuring about 8 inches from the top to the bottom up here. So make sure that that's how yours is coming out, because that'll make sure that your pumpkin is the right measurement for the small. So now that we're to this point, we get to cast off all this work we've been doing. So to cast off, as a little reminder, is you knit the first stitch, you knit the second stitch, and then you'll take the first one we did, put your needle underneath, and you're going to bring it over this other stitch right here without sliding that one off. So sometimes I'll hold on to it and just very carefully bring it over. So you'll still have that second one that was here, and then this one just went over it, and then you'll slide that one off, and then you'll knit the next one. You'll just bring this one over it, and so you'll just keep repeating that, just going ever so slowly because you don't want to lose that one. So we knit, bring the first one over that second one, and you'll just keep doing that all the way to the end. Alright, I've been trying to cast off all the way to the end. I'm down to my last two on this needle. So when you're down to your last two, you'll still do what we've been doing, where you take that first stitch and bring it over that second one. And this is where we will want to cut our yarn. You'll want to leave a long tail though, because this is where we're going to be doing lots of sewing and drawstringing and all that kind of stuff. So I'd leave as long as you can. Don't want to be too long, because then you'll have some issues. So I'm going to say this one, I measured mine, so mine's about 60 where I'm going to go, and then I'm going to snip it. If you need more yarn, you can always add more yarn. So if that happens, I can show how to do that. So get my yarn out of the way here. So we haven't done anything with our needle yet. So what I like to do is I like to slip off. So don't lose your loop though. You can even like pull it a little bit. And then I like to take the end of the yarn where we clipped it and pull it through that little hole. And that'll create our little knot, and then that'll secure our yarn and we won't lose that stitch. So now we have that all finished, and we have everything all secured. So now we're going to start assembling our pumpkin. So I like to flip it the other way so the knit side's up, because I like using where the purl side shows. I feel like it has a nice look when you do the pumpkin and everything. It gives it a nicer look when it's finished. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to fold this in half and have the two ends meet, so that just the purl side is on the outside. And try and match everything up here. So the plan is to sew down this side, fasten off, start here and attach it, sew up this side, and then sew up across the top. Because because we created that double layer, so then it won't make our stuffing show through. So I'll show these steps, but I kind of wanted to give you a heads up of how we were going to be doing everything. This is when you'll want to get your needle, your sewing needle. This is when the small one is needed. We won't need the big one until a little bit later. So get that all ready to go, and we'll start sewing down that left side. Now, if you want to, just to kind of help keep everything pretty even, you can get some safety pins and pin across the top here just to keep everything from moving all over the place on you. So you're welcome to do that. I'm just going to be focusing on each little section. So when you're doing this side, I just really try to make sure it doesn't, because it curls. When we were knitting, everything kind of curled. So I'm just going to try and make it so it doesn't curl on me and bunch up, because you can feel where it's curled here, it's thicker, whereas when you kind of force it to meet up and flatten out, it's not as thick. So try to make sure that you have your ends meeting up. And I'm just trying to grab, and you might grab two, because you'll kind of see where there's two stitches. Try to focus on just at least grabbing a stitch from each side on your way down, because that's really all we're focusing on, is just trying to attach these two pieces together. But you don't want to do too many, because it'll be kind of bulky, and you don't want that. So as you go, you'll probably have to keep, uncurling it and pressing it and checking, because it'll kind of keep curling on its own. So just make sure you're checking on that and just going through your two, and then just the one, or just make it, like I said, just make sure that you're not going through a whole bunch of stitches, just underneath a couple. Don't overthink it. It's like even right here, could just be going through the two, so one on this side and one on the other side. Just working your way across to the end, and then I will show you how to fasten that off. Alright, so I just finished going all the way down, sewing these two together. So now we're going to want to fasten and tie this off, and then start going on the other side. So what I usually like to do is I like to kind of grab just whatever loops are kind of close to where my tail is here, and start going through like if I was just be sewing. But then make sure not to go all the way. So like leave like a loop, and then I put my needle through that loop to create a knot. So as I keep trying to pull this closed, it'll create like a little secured knot. So I'll do that one more time typically. Sometimes I have to go in a different spot just to kind of grab. And remember to pull your needle into that. So just to create a couple knots so that it won't go anywhere. I'll leave a little bit of a tail, but it'll be tucked and hidden on the inside when we get to assembling our pumpkin. So just leave a little bit, but it'll be secured because we've got our knots. So not very long, pretty small tail. And so we'll basically be doing the same thing that we just did on this side, except we'll be creating a knot and then adding our yarn through, and then you'll just do the same thing sewing wise, and then I'll talk about how to do this part next. So make sure to create a little knot on the end of your working yarn here. So I usually do about 3 knots just to really make sure it won't go through any of my like little holes that we've got here, because that can be really frustrating when you're trying to sew. Alright, so that's a pretty good knot there. So what I will do now, make sure everything's all lined up. So I usually will pick a side to have my yarn come through, so I'm going to just do it right here. So I'm just going to be working just to get my knot secured. Do a little test. Ooh. See, mine wasn't quite big enough for that little hole, so I'm gonna make it just a little bit bigger. Also just depends on where you put your thread. So mine happened to be through a bigger hole there. So sometimes you can just make your knot a little bigger, or you can just try again on where you're putting your thread. So now we're doing the same thing, just making sure to kind of flatten and then work through our little loops all the way up to the top. I think we did on that other side. Alright, so we did all this side now. So our yarn is ending up here after sewing that. So now we're going to want to do the entire top of this. It's pretty much the same concept of what we've been doing, where you're just going to grab at least a loop from each side, like we've been doing. It'll be a lot easier to see it this way because that's how our stitches are lined up, whereas we were kind of working in a different direction before, so it was a little harder to see. But you're just grabbing 2 loops, working all the way across. So try and keep everything as lined up as neatly as you can while doing so. Alright, so I just got done sewing all the way across the top here. So the way mine turned out is because I was only doing the one from each side, I was doing the inner ones. This is the other part that kind of showed. So if you went through 2 on both sides, it'll probably look a lot neater than this. But either way, this won't matter because this is the top. It'll be like the top part and it'll bunch together. So you won't really see all this anyway. So as long as you just sewed through both sides and as long as your 2 sides are together and it looks as neat as you can, it'll be fine. So now we're going to get to the part where we're going to be attaching our 2 sides to give it that circular pumpkin look. And this can be a little tricky because you're working through so much. You'll be working technically through 4 different pieces, so it can be a little bulky. So what you'll want to pay attention to is wherever you left your, tail, that's going to be your inside. So I like to start, when I sew things together, I like to have what is going to be the inside done on the outside. So what will happen is we'll sew this together, and then when we're done, we'll flip it. So this tail will only be on the inside, and it will also make things a little neater, I think, when it comes to sewing. So we're just going to kind of sew through, instead where we were just doing the one, so you'll be sewing through both pieces and as neatly as you can where they just attach. So you don't want to go like way down, you just kind of want to stay right along here is where I want to be poking my needle. I don't want to be going way down here, just right along this row. I'll just go all the way across again. So just do it as neatly as you can, and you don't want to go super tight, but just enough that it's holding everything together. So I'll just go all the way to the end. I should have enough yarn to sew all the rest of this, but if you found that your string is not long enough at any point during the project, you can do exactly what we did where you attached it. You can do that at any point of the piece. Just make sure that where you're attaching it and having your knot sticking through is going to be on the inside, so keep track of which sides are going to be which. And that's just how you can attach your yarn if you run out. So just, if this were to get shorter and I run out here, I would just add more yarn, start threading it through, and then tie this end with the new one. So leave a little bit of a tail and tie it, and make sure that that's going to be on the inside. So if you ever find that while you're working on a project and you run short on yarn when you're sewing, that's a good way to add it and secure also. Because sometimes we don't know how much yarn we're going to need. Alright, so I just sewed all the way across. Now if you happen to have a much longer yarn tail than this, you're in good shape. I'm probably going to need a longer one to do. We're going to end up doing the whole top here. And I need a little bit, I think I have a little bit more yarn than what's here. But this is a good point where you could add your extra yarn if you're like me and you don't have very much. This would be a good point to start adding more yarn. So that was what we sewed, and it looks, that's why I do this on the inside, because it's not as neat. So we'll want to flip out on the outside now. So this is our outside. So this still isn't quite, it's neater than this side, but we're going to be covering this once we do our little ridges on our pumpkin. I'll show you. It will not show. So don't worry if yours is like, oh my gosh, it's not looking that great. That's all right. We're going to be covering that all up, and you won't even see it, I promise. All right, so if this is where you'll add your new tail if you need something longer. And we're going to do a drawstring across all the way around here, and I'll show you how to do that. So you don't need super duper long tail. So if you're going to do a tail, I'd do maybe about 30 inches. This is a little longer than 30 inches, but you can do about 30 inches to get a tail going, just so we can have something to work with, because we're going to be creating on both sides our drawstring closes. So you don't need a ton of yarn for that, but just to work it in, you usually need quite a bit of yarn. Not nice and big, so don't slide through our stitches. So remember, we flipped it, so I want to attach where my knot is on the inside, because that will be where we won't see it. So I'm going to just attach it, because I didn't quite gather both of these together, so I'm going to attach it on this side right here, just to have it have a spot to kind of be secured before we get to this drawstring part. So this will be a little tricky, because this is where our piece curves. So to do the drawstring, I just kind of look where it's already kind of sticking up. I look for the stitches that are already kind of on the top right there, and just go under one of them. Work my way through a couple of them on just my needle and pull through all of that. So you'll just be doing that all the way around, where you're just looking for those bumps that naturally come up. Try to go straight as you can across those. And you can do a whole bunch at a time. You can do one at a time. Do whatever you feel comfortable with doing. It'll just take you longer if you do one at a time, or only so many on your needle. But don't push yourself if you're not comfortable, because they do slide off. So just nice and easy, and try to be as straight as you can. Try not to go too over to the side or too over on this side. Just try to stay where it's showing is on top. And just do that all the way around until you meet where our seam is. So I've gone all the way around, just going through those little loops. So now you should be able to just pull, and it should start gathering like that. And sometimes you'll have little bits of gaps, because it's just how thick our piece is here. So you'll want to do a little bit of just kind of closing it off and sewing just a little bit, just sewing couple of these bits together just because it won't evenly stay like that. So what I usually do is I'll kind of bunch. Like I'll take like my fingers and kind of hold on to where there's naturally these indentations and kind of just hold it in place as I'm gathering it. Just so that I have a spot to hold on to while we're trying to get this all together. And typically what I do is I just kind of find, okay, this is where my yarn is right here. So I'll probably go across from that kind of over here. But you kind of want to go lower because you don't want to go way up here because we'll see that. You kind of go closer to where you'll be able to feel where we gathered our stitches, where that little ring is. So try to find where that is and then bring it through. Because as we're pulling this, this will start pulling this together. See? That's why I said don't do it way up here, because if you're pulling it, you'll see that long string across, and you don't really want to see that because it's low enough that we'll be gathering these two sides. And then what I'll do is try and do it the other way. So I kind of create just like these little star effects. And sometimes I only have to do it, you know, 1, 2 times. Sometimes if it's a bigger pumpkin, you might have to do it a couple times. It's just so that you don't have a hole and you see your stuffing or your pumpkin falls apart on you. So it's just to kind of make it gather really nice. So I'm just going to come up on this other side right here. Try not to go up too, like I said, you don't really want to come up where any of these are. You kind of want to stay as close as you can to the center while still going through your material here. So that's where we went before, so I'm probably just going to go right over to this other side. Try not to poke your fingers as you're doing this. So you'll get more of a feel of what you like and how you want it all to come together. Because I'm like trying to poke my finger where the hole was. You can just see where our things are, but you're not really going to see much of a hole. So you really just want to get it so that you're not having a hole down here. So like I said, maybe 2 times, 4 times if it's a much bigger pumpkin. And then usually you'll have some adds, like this was our string that wasn't quite long enough. So if you happen to have one of those, or even one that's just even a little bit longer, will be better because it's easier to tie. And I usually just tie a knot. That way you don't have to weave it in any of your stitches. And I usually will cut. So I can use this for some scraps. But then this is our other one, so I'll cut that one as well because we're done using this one. We'll need to drawstring it, use this rest to drawstring the other side. So it kind of almost looks like a small beanie. Alright, so we'll turn it back inside out. So now this is the part where we'll stuff our pumpkin. So you want to get some of your stuffing. If you don't have any stuffing, you can definitely use yarn scraps, fabric scraps, anything that's soft if you want. I've even seen people, they'll use beans, like dried beans. I wouldn't recommend using rice just because of how small these stitches are, but beans would definitely work. So you can get really creative with what you want. The beans would be fun because then it kind of makes it, I don't know, more floppy pumpkin, but it could also make it just kind of stand, it won't rock as much. So with my stuffing, I like to start it and then kind of create a little donut. And then that'll help make the stuffing a little bit more stiff because it fluffs it up a little bit more as you're doing it. So you'll just keep doing that, but you see that this is why we did the double layer. You can't see any of the stuffing through. And you can make sure you're fluffing it up. Because sometimes it gets so compacted in those bags, it just needs a little bit of fluffing. So I don't add as much as I possibly can because once we drawstring it, it'll change the shape of our pumpkin and I can move the stuffing in different areas and different spots. So I just do just enough where I create my donut and stick a hole and then we'll do the drawstring, and then I'll see where I need to add more. That's the most versatile time to add stuffing because you can open and close the drawstring. So I'm creating my knot so that we can attach this working yarn, kind of like we've been doing. You'll get really good at this with this project. And I always like to start kind of where this is, where the seam is, because then I know where I started. It just helps me. So I just kind of find a spot we can go back through. Now I find the best way to do this, because this is the side that we sewed the two sides together. And if you have dark or light enough yarn, you can see where you sewed across. So I like to just grab underneath each of those all the way around to do my drawstring. It's a lot easier to grab, it's a lot easier, and you've got two pieces here, so it's pretty thick to try and go through both. It might be tricky because of how tight you did everything. But right here was one. And even if you grab one that's not, it's not a big deal. Just trying to keep your stitches neat. So just be finding those little loops all the way around. Alright, so I went all the way around through those loops. So you should be able to get to doing that drawstring again. This is where I kind of will go and see how my stuffing's doing. It's pretty loose in there, so that's where I can add some more. Because now this is gathered around, it makes us have a better idea of how our pumpkin's shaping, how much to stuff it. So you can do as much or as little as you like. Just kind of depends on your preference and what you'll be using your pumpkins for. If they're just going to be decor, if you're going to stack them. So you can play around with that with the drawstringing and get an idea. Make sure you keep your tails in there because we don't need those anymore. So this is if I were to completely try and close it. And this will be what you'll want to watch for when it comes to adding your stem, on how big your stem is going to be. So if I were to use this, it probably wouldn't be the best because it's too small. So I'd want to use a bigger stick than this. But now I made it much smaller, so it might actually work now. So things to watch for when you're doing this. Could even add a little bit more stuffing right around here. Alright, so this is where I want to attach it right here. So this is that other side, just to kind of create a more secured I will kind of do my little knot like I've been doing. We go back through and create that small little loop and pull. So make sure you have everything the way you want it and the size that you want it. So I'm going to show you the other method to doing your drawstring that might be a little easier, especially when you start getting pretty tight with a lot of your stitches. So with the other version, we tied a knot at the end and then we started threading it through and then just went around. But in this case, we're not going to. We're going to just leave no knot on the end and do the same thing where we just pick up those little loops along. You'll do that all the way around, but be very careful not to pull this end all the way through. So I would leave quite a bit just hanging right here. So I'll show you as we go here. So as I'm starting to thread it, I'd stop about there and leave that. and then you'll need that when you do your drawstring at the end. So just go through each loop just like we did the other way. So here we are, I did all the way around. So we have both of our little drawstrings at the end. And so you'll just take both of those instead of just the one and do both. And that might be easier with getting this much smaller than the other method. It just will depend on your yarn and how thick it is. Some yarn's a little thicker and some's a little thinner. So I definitely need still stuff mine. But this is another method that you can do to close this up. And then once you get to where you want it and you're comfortable with the stuffing and how it's closing up, you'll just take these two and tie a double knot twice tightly. And then just, I usually will trim these a little smaller, so probably about there, and then tuck them in there. So that's another way you can do this. So now, this is where we're going to create our little bumps of the pumpkin. So remember when I was saying there's that seam, you almost can't even tell that there's even a seam. But to really hide it, you'll want to take your yarn and go right over it. Now this is where you might want to use that thicker and longer needle, depending on how big your pumpkin or how much you've stuffed your pumpkin, because this is where you're going to want to stick your needle all the way through. And if you're doing a really big pumpkin, you might not be able to, because I can just barely grab the tip of mine on this other side. So having a longer needle would probably help with that. So we're just going to go all the way through, and you want to pull pretty tight because that'll create, you see that? That'll create one of our little ridges. So what I do when I start doing these ridges, I go down where I kind of want to start. In this instance, it's where the seam is. Come up through, come up on this other side. So I like to kind of go down and then go across. And then I'll do across and across. So you'll create 4 sections. And then we'll see where that takes us. Because if I want to have more ridges, I'll divide each of those 4 sections again. But depending on the pumpkin and how everything comes out, you might be fine with the way it is having just 4. So make sure you're pulling these very tightly because you want to be able to get those good bumps. Alright, now I'm going to go on this side and down. And go through this side. Pulling tightly. And go on this other side, go around through that. And as you go, this will tighten a lot better and it won't be as bad trying to put your needle through. It's just for that first couple where it's still pretty because this will flatten as we're doing this. It gets a little more flat. So here we are with our 4. I'm going to probably divide these again. So just work your way around. At this point, you could probably just go in a circle around, creating your little ridges. So you start getting more of those grooves. So, and try your best to go in between. It doesn't super matter that much, like as you can tell, I really haven't been paying attention, but it just creates more of a ridge evenly. Hopefully we don't run out of yarn here. We're getting close. Oh boy, we're getting really close on the yarn. So I may have to attach this to get it to make it to the end here, because I needed just one more section. So what I'll probably do is attach a section here, go back through and come up to do this side, just so that it's secure, because if I try and do it here, my knot's going to show up on the outside. We don't want my knot on the outside. Since we're just finishing this up, I don't need a ton of yarn. So, just a decent amount here. So this is where I'm going to tie it, just because it didn't quite make it. And that happens more than you think with me. You just have to learn how to hide your ends. So like I said, we typically would go this way, but we don't want that showing. So I'm just going to go back through. And I won't be able to go all the way through because of my knot, but I can at least tuck that in. And then bring as neatly as I can all the way around and then back through. So then you're getting all your different little ridges there. It looks almost like a pumpkin now. Okay, so I'm going over a little bit where I'm actually going to pick up some of the yarn here, so I'm not going back through the same hole, because I want to tuck and hide my end back where we've been having our end tied, because this is where I'm going to be hot gluing my stem, so everything will be pretty secured with that. I don't have to worry about anything coming loose. So that's what I'm going to do with that. So I'll just leave a little bit of a tail, because then I'm just going to set it here and then it'll get hot glued when I do my stem. And at this point, because we cleared everything up, I probably don't even have to worry about my hole, because everything kind of covers up where my stuffing's coming in. So this is about where you can kind of run free, because you can add your stem or add leaves like I'm gonna do, or you can stack your pumpkins. So if you're doing, this is the small one, so if you're wanting to do larger ones, like the medium and the large, you could make little pumpkin towers and stack them. I've done that and they turn out really cute. So you can do all sorts of things. So I'm going to be doing my stem and then my little leaf. So I got to get my hot glue going here, and we'll get to that next part. So when you get to doing your stem, if you find that yours is really big and you can't have a way to make something match, what I did is I went in through, kind of like I was doing with the drawstring. So I've got my two different pieces, and I didn't tie a knot, I just have it loose like this. So I just went in with my needle, so let's say that pretend that I have the yarn on there, is I kind of just grabbed and then went through. So we'll pretend I have that and went through, and then grabbed and went through, and did that all the way around and created like a little drawstring just through some of the top loops here. And then I can just pull this much tighter. And then that way, that is a lot more realistic for me to be able to stick something like that in. So if you find that yours ends up too big like mine did, I think with the bigger pumpkins it can be more trickier. But that's a way that you can make your hole a little smaller if it turns out it's not small enough, and you just drawstring that and tie it. Alright, my hot glue gun is heating up right now. So what you'll probably want to do if you're going to plan on making a bunch of these, I just got, a big stick from my yard. Like, not that big, but a long one. And I took a pair of pretty sharp pliers, because you're going to need to be able to cut these. And so I just cut them into different, shapes, or mostly just different sizes, because some pumpkins might need a bigger stem or smaller stem. And these are just nice to have on hand, especially when you're making a whole bunch of these. So these are just ones that I had left over from last time I made pumpkins. So I kind of played around. I haven't glued these on yet, but I've been playing around with my placement and figuring out what I want mine to look like, and I kind of like the way that's turning out. So that's probably what I'll do. I'll probably glue my stem on first and then glue the leaf next to it. And another idea I was thinking of while I was assembling this is I have in the past taken pipe cleaners, and if you kind of wrap them around, you can even wrap it around a stick or wrap it around a pencil, and you can make little curls if you would like. You could do that too. I had some last year that I did that were kind of a sparkly, tinsely look, and you could add that to it or whatever you want to do. But it's a nice addition as well to get that if you want a curly little vine or adding a little more to your pumpkins. So I believe my hot glue gun is ready now, so I'm going to be gluing. I'm going to probably just add some glue here and then just set that on top, or you could do the other way. I might actually do the other way. Figure out which one I want on top. Add some glue. With this pumpkin, I did 3 sticks just to kind of play around with the texture, and I feel like it kind of gave it more of that detailed look that pumpkin stems have. So you could definitely put a bunch together to do one stem. It also will help fill in some of those holes too if you have a hole that's pretty large but you don't have very thick sticks. So now here we have our pumpkin all made. So hopefully you were able to make a pumpkin as well with this tutorial. If you have any requests or need any suggestions or help with making your pumpkins, drop them in the comments below. I always love to hear from everybody who is watching. So until next time, everybody.